The Soviet Union emerged from revolution, war, and collapse, promising order and equality after years of chaos. Born from the ruins of Imperial Russia, the new state sought total transformation of society and power. Revolutionaries believed centralized control was the only way to prevent exploitation and foreign domination. The Bolsheviks dismantled old institutions and replaced them with structures loyal to revolutionary ideology. Power was concentrated within a single party that claimed to represent workers and the future. Political opposition was eliminated to ensure unity, stability, and ideological consistency across the state. The Soviet system rejected pluralism, believing disagreement weakened collective strength. Leadership argued that discipline and obedience were necessary to protect the revolution from internal threats. The state rapidly expanded its authority into every aspect of political and economic life. Industry, land, and resources were brought under centralized government ownership and planning. Private enterprise was abolished in favor of state-directed production and collective goals. Economic planning replaced markets, aiming to control output, labor, and distribution nationwide. 5-year plans dictated production targets, reshaping cities, factories, and entire regions. Success was measured by quotas and output, not by individual welfare or personal freedom. Rapid industrialization was pursued regardless of human cost or social disruption. Millions were mobilized to work in factories, mines, and massive infrastructure projects. The state portrayed sacrifice as patriotic duty in service of a greater collective future. Rural populations were forced into collective farms to secure food supplies and state control. Resistance to collectivization was framed as sabotage against progress and national survival. Food shortages and famine followed, but dissent was silenced to preserve authority. Security services expanded to monitor loyalty and eliminate perceived enemies of the state. Surveillance became routine, shaping behavior through fear and constant uncertainty. Citizens learned that survival depended on conformity and political obedience. Propaganda reinforced loyalty by controlling information, history, and public perception. Media, education, and art were reshaped to promote ideological unity and devotion. The state presented itself as the defender of workers against capitalist exploitation. External threats were emphasized to justify repression and internal control. Foreign powers were portrayed as enemies seeking to destroy the socialist experiment. Militarization became central as the state prepared for conflict and expansion. War further strengthened centralized authority and justified extreme control measures. Victory reinforced belief that strict order and sacrifice ensured national survival. After war, the state tightened its grip to rebuild and prevent instability. Economic recovery prioritized heavy industry over consumer needs and personal comfort. The Soviet Union emerged, powerful, disciplined, and rigidly controlled by design. Expansion of influence followed victory, as Eastern Europe was absorbed into a controlled political sphere. Satellite states adopted similar systems, enforced through military presence and loyal local governments. Borders hardened as ideological divisions split the world into rival power blocs. The Cold War transformed fear into a permanent feature of daily life and governance. Nuclear weapons elevated control, secrecy, and obedience to matters of survival. Internal security intensified as paranoia about infiltration and betrayal grew. Purges removed officials, officers, and citizens accused of disloyalty or ideological weakness. Fear became institutionalized, shaping careers, families, and private conversations. Citizens learned silence was safer than honesty in an environment of constant suspicion. Economic inefficiencies grew as planning struggled to match real conditions and needs. Bureaucracy expanded, prioritizing reports and compliance over innovation and flexibility. Factories met quotas on paper, while quality and morale quietly deteriorated. Corruption emerged as officials manipulated systems to survive rigid expectations. Consumer shortages became normal, reinforcing dependence on the state. Housing, employment, and education were allocated through loyalty and connections. Social mobility existed, but only within strict ideological boundaries. Independent thought was discouraged as dangerous and destabilizing. Scientific and cultural achievements were celebrated when aligned with ideology. Dissenting artists and thinkers were censored, exiled, or imprisoned. The state defined truth, rewriting history to preserve legitimacy and control. Leadership transitions exposed vulnerabilities within the centralized system. Power struggles occurred behind closed doors, hidden from public scrutiny. Reforms were attempted cautiously, fearing loss of authority and order. Attempts at economic change often clashed with entrenched bureaucratic interests. Stagnation set in as growth slowed, and public trust quietly eroded. Military spending strained resources, while living standards lagged behind rivals. Information suppression delayed recognition of systemic failures. The gap between official narratives and lived reality widened steadily. Citizens adapted through apathy, quiet resistance, or disengagement. Control remained strong, but belief in the system weakened beneath the surface. The appearance of stability masked growing structural fragility. Central authority struggled to manage complexity across vast territories. Local problems accumulated faster than solutions could be enforced. Reform efforts exposed how rigid control limited adaptation and resilience. The system that ensured order now resisted the change needed to survive. Public faith declined as promises of prosperity failed to materialize over successive generations. Economic strain increased pressure on leadership to confront long-ignored inefficiencies. Greater openness revealed the depth of environmental damage and human cost. Information once hidden now undermined confidence in centralized authority. Regional identities resurfaced as control from the center weakened. Satellite states questioned obedience as enforcement became costly and uncertain. Political reforms unintentionally accelerated demands for autonomy and reform. The monopoly on power fractured as alternative voices gained visibility. Security forces hesitated, uncertain whether repression would preserve or destroy legitimacy. Economic collapse exposed the limits of command-driven systems. Shortages worsened, eroding trust in the state's ability to provide stability. Negotiated exits replaced force as control became unsustainable. Borders shifted as former republics asserted sovereignty. The centralized system unraveled faster than leaders anticipated. Decades of enforced unity dissolved into fragmented national paths. The collapse revealed how fear sustained order but weakened resilience. Control without adaptability proved unable to survive systemic shock. Institutions built for obedience struggled in a world demanding flexibility. The ideology that once unified millions lost its persuasive power. Power transferred not through conquest, but through exhaustion. The end came quietly, without invasion or final battle. A superpower dissolved through internal contradiction rather than external defeat. The legacy remains visible in political structures and social memory. Former citizens navigated freedom after generations of control. Some systems endured, others vanished with the state. The experience reshaped global understandings of power and governance. The Soviet Union demonstrated how order can exist without sustainability. Its history warns of the limits of control as a foundation for endurance. Stability imposed from above may persist, but rarely adapts. Fear can maintain systems, but belief sustains them. When belief fades, even the strongest structures weaken. The Soviet experiment showed control can build empires, but not permanence. Its rise and fall remain a lesson in power, order, and human cost. If you enjoy exploring history beyond the myths, consider subscribing for more documentaries like this. And as always, thank you for watching.